Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Firm. I'm your host, Alex Gore. I am here with Eugene Colberg. He is a Brooklyn-based architect with over 25 years of experience producing award-winning architecture and interiors in the United States and internationally. As a principal, he has designed imaginative and environmentally sensitive projects across the residential and commercial sectors. Welcome inside the firm, Eugene.
Nice to be here. All of that is correct.
So first off, what is Colberg architecture?
We are a small office in Brooklyn, and we do all sorts of stuff. Like an old mentor used to say, from the spoon to the city.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
Well,
that is a wide range. What's a small firm?
5 people, depending on the day.
Okay, nice. Depending on who wants to show up.
Yeah.
So
depending who's remote, who's not.
Yeah, got that. Well, you're ahead of the firm, so maybe you can. What is your opinion of the remote versus in person?
I don't know. I think there's 2 aspects to that. One is working remotely as a team internally, right? As the office. The other one is interacting remotely with clients.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is a lot more challenging.
Yes.
Because it just kind of turns into a process of just kind of checking boxes. You know, you go to meetings and you're just like, okay, you usually send a PDF ahead of time, and you're just kind of going through things, and it's not, it's hard to express emotions over Zoom.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things, especially in pre-design and schematic and stuff, are just sort of kind of charged with emotions. You're trying to convey a certain electricity and a certain excitement about what you're trying to do, and it's hard to do it over Zoom.
Yeah, I'm actually a strong proponent of firms working together in physical space. And I know that I'm on kind of maybe the way out, but there's a specific reason for it. And the big debate that I'm watching is Apple. I don't know if Apple employees have been having this back and forth. And one of their main contention points is, hey, these just bumping into someone randomly isn't true. But the point that I get is like, okay, that's one thing, and that came from Pixar. Like, that's one small aspect. And I was drinking up with a buddy. This was a couple years ago, actually, probably not even that long ago. And he's an architect, and I was just making fun of him just because he's my buddy. And I want to see if this rings true in your
okay.
firm.
Yeah.
And the reason and he's like, no, I love remote work. I'm going to keep doing it, and all that. And I go, and of course, this is my friend, so I talk to him different than other people.
Sure.
But I said, you're a bastard. He's like, why? I go, I remember when you started at that firm, you said that you sat next to like the head designer of that firm. And every day you would get tips, you would get little tiny critiques, you'd get lessons. He'd look over and see, something and just do something, say something, and you get better over like 2-3 years. You just got amazing. You're one of the best designers in this whole firm.
Sure.
And I said, you're a bastard, because what about the person that just joined that doesn't get that?
Yeah.
And I think that's
no, and that was, I mean, I think that the yes, and that's, I wholeheartely agree with that. I mean, I think when I started, I remember people used to give me and other youngins crap for wearing headphones.
Yeah.
While you're drafting or while you're doing things, like, oh, you're not absorbing this, you're not absorbing that. I'm like, yeah, sure. But the working remotely thing, I mean, I've been on teams in other offices where you're working different time zones, different states, different, locations. So that's always kind of been a part of a dynamic, I think, for the last maybe 10 years.
So you're mostly agreeing that my
Um,
friend's a bastard.
Oh, no, he is. 100%.
Good.
100% he is. But just kind of going back to the remote thing, I think that there are scenarios where that's been the only choice.
Yeah.
For years, right? Like if you're working on a project overseas, or, even if you're working on a project with a different office, or a local architect, or, an engineer that's kind of far away. And, you sort of need to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And there's no set formula on how to do it for, if there was, people would be doing it, but everybody's so different.
Yeah.
And each project is so different that,
Gotcha.
But yeah, your buddy's a bastard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll let him know to listen to this.
Yeah. He's kind of a jerk too. Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
you can just nail him. You know who.
Yeah,
I'm
we can just
about.
keep going for how much time we got? Half an hour? Yeah, let's keep
going. Could you, circling back, what was your journey from college to starting your own firm?
Well, I won't bore you with the details, but I went to a BR program, which is 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't accept, when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I was really getting into. But I knew that was the kind of the general path. But I knew that the quicker I got to a working opportunity, that's at the end, that's kind of like what I wanted to do. I didn't want to spend that much time in college, because at the end of the day, sort of architecture is what I wanted to do. Whatever that was, I didn't necessarily understand that when I was 17. And so I came to New York. I've been in New York ever since 1998. And I went, I sent resumes everywhere, hard copies on a number 10 envelope. And I landed on a kind of small, medium office that was a generalist office that, those guys did everything from houses to galleries to museums to apartments to, anything that they would not say no to anything. Yeah. And I think that's where I got I think the majority of the DNA of our practice, because there is a value of understanding one type of project, look through, you have the baggage of other project types that you can compare to. The more of a specialist you are, the more just kind of focus you are. And in our opinion, it's better to know a little about a lot than to know a lot about a little. And so anyway, so I was there for a long time, 10 years, 12, I forget. But the sort of, the office grew as and challenges grew and the difficulty of projects grew as my sort of experience there grew. And then I went to Gensler for a couple of years. It had one of the retail studios in New York. And that's one of the places where I'm like, oh, okay, I need to figure out how to work through these projects with teams. And we had a team in Chicago, we had a team in DC, and Maryland, and Florida. So it was not only communicating with a team of 5-10 people in New York, it was also like all of these cross-state teams. And we were doing it. We were doing it remote. I mean, we were doing like we're doing now, right? It was a little bit more primitive. And then after a couple of years there, I went back to a place that I always wanted to be. The office is called the Ennead now. It used to be called Polshek some years ago.
Okay.
After its founder. And there, I had the opportunity to work in projects overseas and locally. But I think the kind of the general kind of arc or thread is that I've always had the the luck or the sort of opportunity to have a long leash on things. Like people would just, principals or sort of directors above me always give me a long leash, which is something that I do here as well. I mean, I think that people need space to breathe. You need, to have confidence in the folks that work with you. So that definitely helped in developing both the sort of the mantra of the office and how we work, but also getting as a person, growing in experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it in a nutshell.
How did you start this firm?
Well, so probably not atypical, but I've always done independent work, just little projects here and there. I mean, and I think that was always an asset to the things that I was doing in the office, because you would be, the sense of responsibility and, time management and, so on and so on. And at some point the momentum shifts, right? You have enough independent work that you're like, okay, well, is this what you want to do? Is it, is this the type of project you enjoy doing? Is it, what that is? And at some point the momentum shifts, right? And then you're like, okay, well, it's time to pull the plug. I was extremely lucky that the office that I was with, we sort of had a very, very lengthy not separation, but extraction. And that was extremely helpful.
Do you mean, could you clarify that? Like you let them know and then it was like, okay, work here for 6 more months?
Exactly. I let them know. I was still finishing a couple of buildings with them. And
okay, you stayed on to finish the projects.
Yeah, not only were they extremely gracious and extremely happy for me, because you never know how it's going to go, right? You never know if somebody's going to be upset that you're leaving or that you're, but the partner that I was working with was, he was so happy, like genuinely happy for me and so gracious. And he's like, I better see you in 10 years with a 20-person office. Otherwise I'm going to be upset. No. And then I was finishing a couple of projects. So I was able to stay, part-time or sort of hourly to just kind of finish those projects off. I mean, I had a particular expertise in multifamily residential and kind of commercial building that office was cultivating, but it didn't have that much.
Yeah.
So they were always, they still use me as a resource here and there. So we still have a good relationship. And so I was lucky with that.
I think that's rare. And I think that goes both ways, because a lot of times there is this, oh, you give them your 2 weeks and you're done.
Yeah.
If you've been working on a project for 8 months and you have 2, 3, 4 months left, it's like you've been
working on a project for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what are you going to do? But yeah, no, and if somebody tells me tomorrow that, it's like, yes, of course I would be, I mean, if I can emulate what this person did to me and that tone and that encouragement, I would do it every day of the week.
Yeah. I think, but that's a key message though, because I think it's just been standard practice. And it's fine. I understand it, but it's like, oh, you give your 2 weeks, or either side, either being laid off or the other way, right. You're leaving, and it's just not conducive to reality of, holy cow, what are we going to do now?
You can't. I mean, even on a healthy hiring environment, let's say, it's not like you can get all your ducks in a row in a month. You can't do that. Right. Yep. And if you're working on a large civic project or in a large, complicated project, it's like there's multiple stakeholders. There's like consulting. It's just like the team is so big that you're like, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. And then also
this guy and
it's also true that sometimes you can plug into a new firm and they have stuff to do and it's in your area and expertise and that all works out too. But I do feel that other times Yeah, I know from a lot of different friends. It's like, yeah, this new guy, he's been around. Like it takes a month or two.
It
So
takes like 6 months
yeah, so why not have that
to really,
interlap?
yeah, exactly.
Why not be 50-50 for
Yeah.
the for who I'm 3 to 6 months,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that reaction from the partner that I was working with over at Eniad was just short of magical.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's great. So in architecture, as you know,
yeah.
how do you manage different tasks, different projects, serving multiple different, masters, quote unquote? What
Yeah.
is your kind of way of doing all that?
Well, I think first of all, I think you have to be realistic on what you need to do and understand. I mean, the more time or the more you understand how long things take, both, physically doing something in CAD or in Revit or whatever it is, but also in the face of the project, the more you have that understanding, right? The more you're able to tell people, how long it's going to take, what the deadline is. Because at the end of the day, I think clients want a realistic and pragmatic answer, as opposed to telling them, oh yeah, we're going to have it done in a week or whatever. And then, you're either killing yourself to do it or you're delaying or whatever. I think people understand that. One thing that a professor told me in school one day was like, and back then it was drawing by hand, but just like, make sure you understand how long it takes you to do a drawing of a 24 by 36 sheet, a drawing of a 30 by 42 sheet, whether it's an axon, an elevation, whether you're doing it on pen or an ink or whatever. But it's similar with CAD or similar to, design. I don't know if you can see me, but design with air quotes. It's something that you can't really attach time to as a task, because you never know you never know how long it's going to take. You don't know what, especially with everybody wanting you to jump on calls, because apparently jumping on calls is easier than scheduling meetings, and they expect you to just kind of be half paying attention. So that's a little harder to gauge. But in terms of just like producing stuff, we have a pretty good idea of how long it takes the folks in here to kind of do things, or we know how long it should take. And we give everybody realistic answers. Like, look, we're going to have this done in this amount of time, and there's usually a back and forth, but we try and at some point it's about keeping us happy, but also keeping the client happy by not letting them down too. Yeah. Right. It's like we tell them, it's like, look, this is going to take 3 weeks. And they're like, well, and I'm like, no, we're telling you it's going to take 3 weeks. Like, we wish we could do it faster, but we can't. Yeah. You give them the reasons, you explain why. The thing that I think that's a little bit more complicated is when you have a lot of projects, right? And there's competition between them, and your clients are not very understanding. How do you determine what's the priority? And that's the one that's more complicated.
Yep. And also too, going back to the clients, I found that the ones that want it in an unrealistic time frame, because some people are realistic and it just might be slightly quicker than you think it's going to be, and I think you can work with them. The people that want a whole house, not only like an addition, modeled up, designed, in the building permit and ready to build in 2 months, is unrealistic. And I've had them say, like, literally not go to myself, but also to competitors that I know slash friends. Yeah. And all I said, good luck with that person. Good luck.
No. And we've had clients like that, but I think that part of getting into that conversation is also understanding what their goals are and what their pressures are as clients, right? Because they might be thinking that, and we see this a lot, they might be thinking that, they need X, Y, and Z by X date, but we're like, well, no, actually, hold on a second. There's a way of doing this where you're going to have the same end result, but the sort of the minutia milestones looks completely different. And I think that's where doing projects of different categories or different programs, I think, informs our process a little bit more. Because we can say, look, the way that you do multifamily residential building is this, but the way that we've done this other type of project is we split it a little differently. And they're like, oh, okay, well, can we learn from here? And can we, is there a way of breaking down a little bit different? But the more you put yourself in your client's shoes, the more you understand where they're coming from and what their priorities are. And the more you can sort of interject a little bit and say, actually, no, hold on a second. For you, what you actually want to do is this. And for this, you need that, not this other thing that you're talking about. And we see that a lot.
Yep. Just briefly looking at your website, which is colbergarchitecture.com. Amazing work. Some of the strong ones that stand out to me are your multifamily residential.
Yeah, those are pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that your bread and butter? Is that your main forte? Or
we don't have an expertise, right? We believe in doing like I said, from the spoon to the city. If there's a project that we do more of, it is multifamily residential. I think it's a type of project, and we do, most of our projects are in New York, and actually most of our projects are in Brooklyn, which is even more sort of micro geography. But the multifamily type of project is a relatable program, right? Everybody, at least in New York or Brooklyn, lives in an apartment, right? You know what that wants to be. They're also not complicated buildings from the point of view of building systems and structure, even facade, right? The structure is pretty formulaic. The MEPs are pretty formulaic, although there's been a couple of recent laws in New York State and New York City in relationship to turning old buildings to electric instead of using gas, that have sort of thrown a couple of wrenches in there. So that's actually been really interesting to understand and to sort of see how we comply with those. But so the program is highly identifiable, right? You live in an apartment, you know what that looks like, you know what you would want it to look like, and operate, the amenities and all of that. It's not a complicated building. So it's an easy, or it's an attainable project for a small office like us to do, right? I can't pretend that our small office can take on a football stadium.
Yep.
Right. Or an opera house or even a hospital. Right. I mean, when I was at ENIAD, I worked in a hospital, and our team was about 50, 60 people. We don't have that. we don't have that capacity. Yeah. But the residential buildings are a great opportunity for a small office who's pragmatic enough to understand what you're actually designing. You're not designing, jewel box buildings, you're designing a residential building, right? You're trying to get the most out of that program. And it allows a small office and a small team like ours to be able to express our design sensibilities into a freestanding building in New York, which is kind of crazy, right? Yeah. A building that's going to be there for,
if it's New York, a long time.
If it's New York, a long time. But
unless you're next to the MoMA, then they'll tear you down and build an extension.
No, you'd be surprised how many buildings get turned down. But no, it's a very attainable project type for a small building attainable project type for a small office who knows what they're doing.
Yep.
And you obviously surround yourself with consultants that are experts, that all they do is this stuff on the building systems and structural side. and it's a win-win for everybody. We can be more nimble. We can service the client a little better. There's not that hierarchy that you would get on a big office. So it's a great project type to work on.
One thing that I thought was cool when I lived in New York was the thin little building I lived in.
Yep.
The steps they were indented in the center, and it was stone. They were stone steps.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how long does that take? I never looked at how old the building was.
Well, because they're marble, and marble's a soft stone. And yeah, so that's what happens on these pre-war buildings.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we like the project type. We've been really, really lucky to work with great developers on these residential buildings that we work on. And in terms of age and in terms of sort of we consider them our peers, right? And it's a great kind of working relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, you can't confuse what you're doing. You're doing an apartment building. You're not doing, a super high end anything, right? Yep. But there's space in there that you can negotiate to do something great. Just because the budget is tight and the parameters are very strict, that doesn't give you an excuse to do something shitty.
Absolutely. What is the future how are you thinking about the future of your firm?
Well, I
can clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
In either external or internal. Meaning, in the future we want to do this or stay on this path, or in the future internally we want to get better at this or change this system. What have you been thinking about in those two areas?
Well, in the future, I'd probably work from the backseat of a driverless car. No, I'm kidding. But no, I think that one of the things that is we consider very strong is that all of our project sites are very close to our office, right? And be able to be involved during construction is key. So the future will always contain projects that are close by. Not only because we believe in bettering the public space and civic space and the lives of people, but they're also it's our community, right? So one thing that we want to keep doing and keep doing well is work on local projects. So the future will always be that in terms of kind of project participation. I think one thing that I would like our office to be more involved in is probably more nonprofit work, both in terms of affordable housing and how can we get a little bit more dialed in kind of planning and participation, whether it's through consulting or just being the architects or designers of a building, but being more involved in that. And how can we be more helpful than what we're being now?
Absolutely.
So that, yeah, I mean, those are kind of, big brush strokes, but yeah, look, if we can get a couple more people, if anybody who's we're hiring. So if I know everybody's having a tough time with that.
Well, then let's end on that note. Where can people get a hold of you? Should they follow you anywhere?
Colbergarchitecture.com. You can see our work. There's a contact button that you can click. Our Instagram account is always fun to follow. It gives you a little bit, it's the official thing, but it also gives you some behind the scenes stuff that's going on. I think it's just Colberg Architecture. And we're in downtown Brooklyn. Come by.
Nice. Awesome.
Knock on our door.
Well, thanks for being on Inside the Firm. Myself and the listeners appreciate it.
Yeah. And tell your buddy again, he's a jerk.
Will do. I'll text him right now.
It's like, look, this dude says you're a jerk. Yeah.